Hello, welcome back. Good morning. Happy New Year. We are very, very happy to start again now in 2021 our series of talks promoted by the United States Spiritist Federation, and of course, with the collaboration of so many people and all of you that have been following us throughout the last year. So this year we have a very exciting um, program for us. We will be having our guest speakers. We will be having group talks and so many other things, so many other surprises for you. So stay tuned. And every Saturday at 11, we are here. Today, we are happy to invite Glaucio Pessoa to be with us. Glaucio? Hello, Glaucio. How are you doing today?
Happy New Year to all of our friends, wherever you are. It's great for us to be in the beginning of a new year, 2021. Can you imagine?
So, as always, we are going to be giving a talk, doing first our opening prayer. And after that, I'm going to introduce Glaucio, and he will start his talk. So we invite you all to join your thoughts, your hearts, so that we can say a prayer of gratitude for our Heavenly Creator, for having been able to become part of a new year, to continue spreading this knowledge, this understanding that can broaden our perspective in relation to our own lives and our mission on this planet. We pray that we may always feel the guidance and protection of the benefactors in all our endeavors, so that we can fulfill the commitments we have agreed to perform during this lifetime. We pray for our homes, our loved ones, and at this moment for our guest speaker, Glaucio, so that he can be inspired and that we can learn through his words, through his presentation, and become each time more encouraged and motivated to continue in this path of redemption. So be it. Okay, so Glaucio Pessoa. Well, I'm going to start with the most important part. He's such a dear friend. We have been working together for quite so long here in the United States Spiritist Federation, and it's always a joy to be able to work with Glaucio and to do everything we have to do in terms of the work for the development and dissemination of Spiritism here in the U.S. And he has been active in the Spiritist movement for over 37 years. He currently serves as Vice President of the Christian Spiritist Community of Atlanta. He has a special interest in Spiritist activities revolving around media, English translation, and music. And Glaucio holds a master's degree in both business administration and electrical engineering, and currently works in data protection and compliance. Glaucio has been a board member of the United States Spiritist Federation for many years, and he continues in this work of support to the United States Spiritist Federation. So, Glaucio, thank you so much. Be welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, always good to provide, to participate, and to be part of the dissemination of Spiritism in the U.S. I mean, it's a pleasure for me. And without further ado, let's talk a little bit about today's topic. A very interesting. This is a very interesting passage, and it is narrated by Mark, and that's the one we're going to be talking about today. But also narrated by Matthew and Luke. So it's the blind man of Jericho. I'm going to read the passage to you all, and the story is very simple. If you take it by face value, there's nothing apparently extraordinary. However, the details of the story make it very meaningful and very significant and very impactful. Actually, this is my favorite story is the one of the Good Samaritan, and my second favorite one is this one. So I'm going to read it to you all. So I'm going to read the version as narrated by Mark in chapter 10, verses 46 through 52. So Jesus and his followers came into Jericho. As Jesus was leaving Jericho together with his disciples and a sizable crowd, a blind beggar named Bartimaeus, Timaeus' son, was sitting beside the road. When he heard that Jesus of Nazareth was there, he began to shout, "Jesus, son of David, show me mercy." Many scolded him, telling him to be quiet, but he shouted even louder, "Son of David, show me mercy." Jesus stopped and said, "Call him forward." They called the blind man. "Be encouraged, get up, he's calling you." Throwing his coat to the side, he jumped up and came to Jesus. Jesus asked him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said, "Teacher, I want to see." Jesus said, "Go, your faith has healed you." And once he was able to see, he began to follow Jesus on the way. So it's very simple, very straightforward parable, but we're going to dissect it and go in each little verse, and we're going to see that there are many details. Before we go into that, I'd like to discuss a little bit of a concept here. And if my friends allow me, all my friends who are listening, allow me to diverge a little bit into literature that is not spiritist. There's a very interesting book which is called The Consulting Bible, and it's written by a famous consultant. His name is Alan Weiss. And he describes what factors what factors allow people do the right thing. So we see a lot of times people who are faced with ethical dilemma, and we see that people sometimes take the right actions, they do what's right. Sometimes they don't do what's right, and sometimes people just don't do anything, right? And he is very interesting. The in his concept, he breaks it down into values, skills, and awareness. Values, skills, and awareness. So basically, values means, again, what is it that I have dear? I mean, what is it that makes up the way I see the world? And also what helps me discern between right and wrong. So pretty much is the ability to decide what's the right path to do and to identify what's good and what's not good. And skills, just like the name implies, again, it's my skills, my abilities. Different people, they have different abilities, they have different ways in which they can impact the world around them. So those are individual skills, and different people, all of us, during our evolutionary path as immortal souls, we've had different experiences. And in these different experiences, we gain different skills, different abilities, and those we carry on. So we are all endowed with with these different skills. And the third factor is called awareness. So it's pretty much for me to be able to identify, be aware of the surroundings, be aware of my environment, also be aware of any situation that is wrong, of anything, or any wrongdoing, or any challenges around me, and also identify opportunities. So it's very interesting that going back to the situation in which people would do what's right, but they don't. A lot of times people would act. Some people that have the will to do something, but they don't. They can't because they are lacking the skills to do something, to do what's right, or to take the right, uh, to do the right action. A lot of times here, and this has little quadrants here, little triangles. So here, number two, that means that somebody would act, right? Somebody has the skills to act, to do what's right. Some people might have the awareness to know that it is a time to act, but they don't do anything. They don't do what's right because they're missing the values, right? We see a lot of that situation. Sometimes in people in position of power, they have the awareness, they know that there are some issues that they need to address, but and they have the skills, they have the condition to do what's right, but they don't because they're missing the value. There's this moral background that they are missing. And finally, we see here in this little triangle here, we see people who could act, but they don't. And they have the values, they know what's wrong or what's right, that they have that in their hearts. They have the ability, the skills, but they don't do what's right just because they are oblivious of different situations. And of course, here we have where we have the intersection, we have here number four, and that means that people who will act. So means that those people that have the values, they have the skills, and they have the awareness. So we see that in a very high spirit like Jesus, the way he was always acting, he was always expressing himself, and that's why in the gospel he says that he says what he explains. He tells people what he thinks because he does not see the title in people. He sees who people are, right? So those are the different situations. So I'm going to go, with this different, there's like a little preamble here for us to, before we delve into the different aspects of the parable. But just for us to know, I mean, spoiler alert, of course, there's a reason why I'm talking about those factors, because the blind man of Jericho, he shows those factors in different in different levels. At any rate, so let's talk about the first verse here. And the first verse is verse 46. And again, Jesus and his followers came into Jericho. Jesus was leaving, so they came to Jericho, and then Jesus was leaving Jericho together with his disciples and a sizable crowd. So there's, of course, the 12, and then there was all the people who were following. And then there was this blind beggar, his name is Bartimaeus, his son, and he was sitting beside the road. So just think about the little details, right? So first of all, Jesus is leaving Jericho. And that by itself is a very important detail. So Jesus is leaving Jericho. The blind man is sitting on the road that leads to Jericho. So Jericho is known as a place of fragrance. That's what it means in Hebrew, because it was a very famous town. It is referred in the gospel, of course, in this passage, and it's very important. And it is in the beliefs, in the values, going back to values, in the values of the time, and in the significance. It illustrated the material, the possessions. It was a very rich town. They have a very flourishing commerce of balms, balms to apply on people, and fragrances. So it was a thriving city. And there's always this dichotomy of comparing Jericho as the opposite of Jerusalem. And I have here a very interesting map, and that shows where they are located. So it is nowadays, it is a city. It's a Palestinian city. Jericho is a Palestinian city. It's on the famous West Bank. And we also have this dichotomy, right? Again, this is Jesus using, Jesus was a great communicator. And as all great communicators, he used concepts, words that were impactful with the folks of his time with his audience, right? The famous know your audience, and Jesus, being Jesus, he knew his audience. You know, needless to say that. And so he used these. He always used this dichotomy. He always used this comparison. And again, here's Jericho. Jericho is just to the east. We have the Jordan River, and to the west, more like northwest, we have here Jerusalem. The distance between the cities, and there's the famous road, right, that connects both cities. The distance is about 18 miles. And it's kind of like interesting because Jerusalem is about 2,000 feet to 2,500 feet um, above sea level. And Jericho is lower. Jericho is 800. It's about is below sea level, right? So again, we have this comparison, and again, we're talking about an illustration in figurative terms. What could represent what's spiritual versus what's represented by what's material. And again, of course, Jericho also appears. It's a very interesting because it comes up more than once in the gospel. We see the famous, again, my favorite parable, the Good Samaritan. And we see the famous story of the man who's going from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he's assaulted, as narrated by Luke chapter 10, verse 30. Okay? So there's this and in this narrative, this has a very impactful. This also has a meaning. I mean, again, this narrative has several important meanings that we need to understand. So here we see that Jesus is leaving Jericho. Okay, so first of all, Jesus is leaving Jericho with his disciples and a large crowd of people. So, first of all, we see here this notion of movement, this the notion of a dynamic, right? I'm moving, I'm moving ahead. And second, we also see in this narrative a representation of leaving the materialistic conceptions behind. So we see this the idea of moving, right? Moving away from what's material. Okay, so that's Jesus. But then we see the second character, right? The main character, the blind man. And interesting enough, the blind man, he's sitting by the road, right? He's sitting by the road that leads to the city. Uh, so he is static, right? Jesus is moving, his dynamic, and he is static. He's not moving in or out of the city. He's in a state of inaction. So definitely he's waiting in this context, he's waiting for material assistance. So what was he waiting for? Right? Of course, material assistance, but he was waiting for material assistance by the entrance of this place that represents materialism. So the question we might ask is, was he expecting enlightenment? Was he expecting happiness? Was he expecting satisfaction based on that material concept, on earthly riches, right? We might infer that. And we can refer, what you might call it, we can empathize with him, because how many times are we sitting and waiting uh, by the road and waiting for the right resources to reach us to help us get enlightenment? So how many times are we waiting for the right conditions to take action so that we can go to the next step? And how many times are we waiting for a better material position? Are we waiting for that, our dream job, or our dream certification or diploma, or my retirement, so that I can start taking a different course in my life? So it's kind of an interesting comparison here, and we can relate to his situation. There is something, and it doesn't stop there, because his name is Bartimaeus. Now, Bartimaeus is derived from Aramaic. So bar means son, Bartimaeus, so bar means son, and tam means unclean, defiled. So his name is son of the unclean. And it's very interesting, having most likely there's a possibility that that wasn't truly his name, right? He could be that could be like what he was known for, right? I mean, because again, in the ancient days, it was based on their understanding. If you're going through some difficult times, that means you're going to be punished. So if somebody was born as a blind person, that meant that that person was somehow the son or a daughter of some kind of impurity, some kind of mistake. So we can also relate to that. We can totally relate to Bartimaeus. Bartimaeus is kind of like an alter ego for us because we are all sons and daughters of impurity. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 5, where Kardec talks about blessed are the afflicted, in 9 and 10, Kardec explains to us that our imperfections they keep us away from perfect worlds. Of course, we're not reached the level of perfection, therefore, we are far from happy worlds and perfect worlds. And therefore, we need several reincarnations to cleanse this impurity. Therefore, we're like kind of Bartimaeus. All of us are in this planet, at least. We're a little bit of Bartimaeus, or we're a lot of Bartimaeus ourselves, because we are the sons and daughters of our mistakes, of our impurities, of our defects. And now, also, Kardec explains to us that our challenges they help us remediate our faults and our shortcomings. So, unlike our ancestors, or shouldn't we say us, as we were reincarnated in the past, we have a better understanding that if something bad, what we quote unquote call bad, happens to us, it is a some sort of a remedy for these imperfections. So whenever we have an atonement, whenever we have been going through difficult times, it is not so much that it's some sort of a punishment. It represents a whole lot more to us as opportunities for betterment, as opportunities for growth. Pain, that we have this famous saying that we either evolve through pain or we evolve through love. So what we call pain, it is really related to our imperfections. In the book in Heaven and Hell, there's a very interesting, Kardec makes a very interesting explanation when he was talking about heaven. I believe it's chapter 3, or yeah, I believe it's chapter 3, when he's talking about heaven. And Kardec explains that two spirits, two souls, might be in the same place at the same time. And one could be in a heavenly state, one could be happy and grateful. And another spirit in the same situation can be miserable, right? Just a very mundane. If you allow me to make a very mundane comparison, I might be at a concert, and this amazing classical music concert, and I might be with a friend of mine, and I might be enjoying myself listening to classical music, listening to Vivaldi the Storm, which is beautiful, beautiful piece. And I'm listening to Vivaldi the Storm, and I'm like, my gosh, I'm in heaven. This is amazing. And my friend who's sitting next to me and say, I cannot stand this. And when is this going to be over? So it's just that different spirits, they have different levels of understanding. They have different backgrounds. So it depends on us. It's up to us to make the best out of our quote unquote suffering, best of our experiences. So another thing that we can relate to our protagonist Bartimaeus, is that he's blind. So we can see somebody who's blind, of course, somebody who cannot see, but also somebody who's blind, somebody who cannot perceive light, somebody who's missing direction, somebody who's eager for enlightenment. So it's I can pretty much relate to that in so many stages of my existence in my life, because how many times do we feel that we're missing direction? We are eager for this enlightenment, and again, and he's a beggar. So he's a beggar. That means inaction, right? A beggar is somebody who's waiting for others. He's asking and waiting for assistance. So again, how many times are we just waiting for others to take charge? Sometimes even waiting for others to take charge of our lives and help us achieve our enlightenment. So that's one verse, verse 46. Verse 47. When he heard that Jesus of Nazareth was there, he began to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, show me mercy." So it's very, the first thing he shows here is like we discussed before. Remember, we were talking about the concept of awareness, right? You need to have awareness to do what's right. So he had awareness. He had two things. He had awareness and he had values. So he demonstrated awareness because he, even though he could not see, but he was cognizant that Jesus was there. And he had values because he recognized that Jesus was the Son, was the Messiah. Um, and it's very interesting. How many times do we see opportunities and we don't recognize those opportunities? We're talking about suffering. How many times we miss the point, and we see suffering just as a punishment, and we forget to understand the lessons that that an experience, and an adverse experience, that a challenge can represent for us. Another very interesting point here is that he immediately began to shout. That was his only recourse. He could not do anything else, but he shouted. So it is amazing because also going back to the awareness is you being aware of what you can do, right? I mean, there's all of us, again, we have different abilities. There's different things we can do. This man, all he could do was shout. And what did he do? He shouted. He was not timid. He did not keep to himself. He did not wait for Jesus to come to him. Just start shouting and asking for help. And so, how many times are we not aware of these resources? And most importantly, how many times we forget? Not always shouting, but at least a very easy resource that all of us have access to, which is pray. If we are in a tough situation, the worst thing, the very least we can do is pray. If we have a friend and that friend of us is in a bad situation and we cannot help him or her, the very least we can do is just pray for that person. If there's somebody we know that we cannot forgive, and if I'm having difficulties forgiving that individual who did me harm, the very least I can do is pray for that person. Now, going back here to his values, so he said, "Jesus, Son of David, show me mercy." There are 17 verses in the New Testament that refer to Jesus as Son of David. So when he was saying that, he was actually acknowledging him as the Messiah, because according to the prophecy, the fulfillment of the prophecy, the Messiah, he was going to be a seed of David. Interesting that the Gospels do mention that Jesus was part of the Davidic line. So first bloodline. Um, so some individuals they refer him, by two ways. By since he was adopted by Joseph, he had part of that descendancy, and also since by blood through Mary. And this is explained also, and Paul also reinforces that idea in Romans chapter 1, verses 3. So it's very interesting that, again, he shows this awareness. He understands that he not only takes action with whatever little resource he had, all he got to do is shout, and he shouted. And he recognized that he had the awareness to recognize that, hey, Jesus is the Messiah. Now, verse 48, this is very important because many scolded him, telling him to be quiet. But he shouted even louder, "Son of David, show me mercy." So it's very interesting that many scolded him. and ask him to be quiet. So it is that is a very important representation. Again, this narrative is full of these tiny details. But just think about it, how difficult it is for us on earth to do the right thing. Whenever we try to do the right thing on earth, we run into so many obstacles. And those obstacles, they can be events, they can be situations, and they can be other people as well. And those other people can be incarnated or disincarnated. They can be people who are quote unquote our enemies, but also sometimes, most of the times, our friends as well. So doing what's right is always, whenever, and due to the situation of the earth, doing what's right is always so much harder here. Again, this is a planet of trials and atonements, so it is not at a high level. So the same way, if I drop an object on Earth, right, it's gonna, whenever I have to lift an object on Earth, it is harder. It requires more energy for me to lift an object on Earth. Why? Because of course, we're talking about gravitational field and the physical conditions. So kind of, and this is I'm saying that as an analogy. Also, here on Earth, it is so hard to do what's right. Right? It's kind of like whenever do what's right, as well as like it requires more to do what's right. And whenever we're going to do something wrong, it seems like we're going together with gravity. As an analogy, it seems to be, it just flows, right? It's due to the imperfections of the planet and our own imperfections that we're trying to combat. So again, uh, his attitude was spot on because he doubled down. So when people were telling him, "Hey, be quiet. Why are you shouting? Why are you asking for help? Why are you bothering Jesus?" And he says, he was unuttered. He actually doubled down. He even louder. He's shouting even louder. So this is the example. This is the prime example of our attitude. And when we're trying to push forward, when we're trying to break our own glass ceilings, right? I'll go beyond our limitations, and we counter obstacles as people, as events, as our environment. We should, quote unquote, shout louder. We should actually push forward. That means that I'm doing something right, right? So if I'm doing something right, and there's all these obstacles, I understand that, hey, I have to push further because I'm doing the right thing. It's very interesting here in question 932 of the Spirit's book, book 4, chapter 1. There's a very interesting question. Why do the wicked in this world so often have power over the good? So, in other words, what is it that apparently here in our planet, evil or what that's not good, prevails? And the spirits explain that this is a direct consequence of the weakness of the good. The wicked are captivating and bold, while the good are often timid. Whenever the good are determined to take over, they will prevail. So it's very interesting here, an explanation from the Spirit's book that reminds us that we should not be timid when we're being good. We should not be timid when people are trying to keep us from doing what's right. We should actually shout louder and double down on our efforts. Verse 49, very important. Jesus stopped and said, "Calm him forward." So here, notice that in the beginning of the parable, there's this dynamic movement of Jesus. Jesus is leaving Jericho. So there's this, and then he stops, right? So he stops. So it's kind of an interesting point here because life doesn't stop, right? The universe doesn't stop. The opportunities, they come and they go. So apparently, sometimes when we go through trouble times, and we're actually doing our best, we have this impression that that's it. This is my chance. And sometimes we have this feeling that the life stopped and gave me a breather for a second. So it is all relative. There is a very interesting book, which is not a Spiritist book, but I recommend. It's called The Universe in a Nutshell by Stephen Hawking. Stephen Hawking, and I like it. What I like about Stephen Hawking is that he's able to explain anything to anybody at a level that all of us can understand. And he talks about the general theory of relativity. And he's, until the beginning of the last century, people always believed that time and space were always constant, right? And then Einstein with the special theory of relativity in 1905, 1906, and then later on with the general theory of relativity, he explained to us that no, that time and space they can expand and contract. So it's kind of like some, I almost see this Jesus stopping as kind of like time expanding and giving him a chance. So let's always think that uh, what we think is impossible might not be impossible, right? The universe, when the right time comes for us, the universe is going to respond to us. Um, and the right time comes, we're going to have our opportunity. So it's, we have this idea. It's kind of like, it's not so much that the universe is going to stop for us. It's just like we have this breather, and we have this opportunity to achieve this enlightenment, achieve this next level. So it's very interesting that we say that, there's this very quote unquote mention of Jesus stopping. Again, Jesus represents, in this case, life. He represents enlightenment, and he represents an opportunity. He represents a next level for our friend Bertinus. Now, the second important thing here is that Jesus says, call him forward, right? Jesus said, call him forward. So the first thing here we see is that Jesus acknowledges him. A lot of times we are desperate and we are praying and we think, my gosh, why isn't God listening to me? Why isn't Jesus listening to me? Why aren't my good friendly spirits listening to me? And that's not true. They're always acknowledging us. They always listen to us. However, there is a proper time for things to happen. And the question is, are we going to be ready? Right? So at this point, then Jesus acknowledges him, but it's very important that Jesus did not go to him. He asked the blind man to be called forward. So again, remember now, Bartimaeus took, so the first action so far, Bartimaeus, all he's done, the first action was to shout. Now Jesus is going to be calling him and is going to take action. He's going to need to actually go to Jesus. And it's a very common theme here in the New Testament. This whole idea of you take action. Remember in John, as narrated by John, chapter 11, verse 43, that in the story of Lazarus, what Jesus tells Lazarus is, Lazarus, come forth. Okay, so when he helped Lazarus, he did not say, "Hey, Lazarus, come over here. Let me carry you. Let me lift you up." He says, "Lazarus, come forward." Okay. Also, when we talk in Luke chapter 15, verse 22, when we talk about the prodigal son, the first thing that the father did for the prodigal son, actually, the father gives the prodigal son three things. And again, there's a symbology behind. So he gives him a garment, a ring, and sandals, right? So the garment means that he is part of the family. He is with the father. The ring means that there's a connection, right? There's this alliance with the father. And very important that the father gives him sandals, because what the father is saying is that, hey, listen, I recognize you. I have a connection with you, but you got sandals, meaning, you're gonna have to also take action. You're actually gonna have to walk on your own feet. So there's this whole idea of movement, right? This whole idea of us also having to do our part, not also having to do our part, but us mostly having to do our part. Then there's the second, in the same verse, there's a second part that say, call the blind man, be encouraged, get up, he's calling you. So this is kind of neat. People are saying be encouraged. So it's not just necessary for us to put in a good effort. It's not necessary for us to take action. Our attitude makes a difference. We got to be encouraged. It's very difficult. This search of us for our betterment, for our enlightenment, for our happiness, it requires us to have to encourage us to be optimistic, right? We cannot be pessimistic. We cannot be a negative people and expect good results, right? We have to have this encouragement. And it's also nice because the same way that we see people who are like trying to push, put people and events who are trying to pull us back, there are also these people around us that that also encourage us to get up and to move. um, get up, right? Get up. So that's the second reference to action, okay, to the man. So we need to take action on our own accord, right? Jesus was expecting him to go to him, and people are telling him, "Get up, take action." Nobody helped him up. Okay, so again, this is we need to take action on our own accord. Nobody, others might encourage us, like is mentioned here, but in the end, we have our own free will. It's up to us to get up and to go for our next steps. So, and then they say he's calling you. So again, we need to have this awareness when we have a call to enlightenment. Going back to the whole point of awareness. In the Gospel according to Spiritism introduction and part 4, they talk about Socrates and Plato and the forerunners of the Christian idea. So we see that throughout times we always been called. We always been called to become better people. We always been called to do what's right. We always been called to help others and to better ourselves. So we always been called. And again, it goes back to this awareness of being called and know that, hey, this is a calling. Sometimes, a lot of times we have these beautiful messages from different doctrines, different religions that, and they have reached us throughout the times. We have these beautiful passages from the gospel, from other spiritual authors, other spiritist authors and spirits. But again, it's up to us to receive the calling. Um, and Jesus also, remember, Jesus told us very clearly, "Come unto me, all that are labor and have a burden, and I will give you rest. Take on my yoke and learn from me, because and lowly heart, and find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light," as explained in Matthew 11, chapter 11, verses 28 and 30. So it's this calling that we receive from Jesus and calling from life. We get calling from life all the time. Life calls us to be aware, to wake up and stand up. And again, all our events that sometimes seem to us as detriments, they are actually events that help us grow. Now, another very important verse. All verses here are important. So, but verse 50, throwing his coat to the side, he jumped up and came to Jesus. So again, two more references to action, right? He threw his coat to the side. He threw his garment to the side, and he jumped up and came to Jesus, right? So why is it important? This whole concept of the coat is very important, and there's a historical context here, because at the time of Jesus, uh, somebody's garment represented who that person was to the world. So we see here again, going back to the parable of the Good Samaritan, we have this reference that the gentleman who had been robbed and who was hurt, he was naked and he was by the road. So that means he had no garment, he had no robe. There was no way for you to identify him, to the world at least. So the back then at that time, since there were no so-called social safe nets, so what that meant is that if somebody had a handicap and there was nobody to take care of that person, there was no kind of social security, no kind of help from the government, no institution that would take care of that person. That person would have to become a beggar. And since he was a beggar, he had the coat, he had the garment, he had like an official garment of a beggar. And again, he removes that, right? He throws. So he was that garment represented that quote unquote he was a beggar, that he would have to live on mendicancy, and also that he was a limited person. He was a homeless person. He was the victim, quote unquote, right? So it's this good question that he had to throw the coat to the side. To the side, he had. He did not just remove, right? He could have just removed the coat and then put it, and just carried it with him, or he could just have kept the coat. But no, he cast the coat aside. So pretty much he disregarded that label that people place on him. He was no longer accepting the label of the victim, the label of the beggar, the label who's depending on others. Because when he throws, there is this very strong, energetic act again that represents movement. He casts aside. He's no longer interested in that. He wants to change that situation. So we see here in the pathway of light, Emmanuel explains to us, chapter 98, that we wear all kinds of capes and robes and garments, and that's the way we try to present to the world. And we have some of us. We have this cape of kings. We have these capes that we have of business people, and sometimes we also have the capes of beggars, just like of the beggars, just like or the beggars or the victims, right? Just like Bartimaeus here, a lot of times we have this little, poor little me conception, and we want people to feel sorry for us, right? And also, some of us, I hope that's not my case. Some of us, we have this robe of the saints, right? We are like, we're like the sepulchres. We have like the graves that have like uh, um, so much impurity inside of us, but outside of us, we try to present as real nice people, as saints and good people. But inside of us, we have all of our imperfections. So a lot of us have that. Um, but interesting that Bartimaeus have to throw so that he could talk to Jesus. So when we're trying to interact with Jesus, when we're trying to search for this enlightenment, we have to be honest with ourselves. We should not allow the outside to define who we are or try to be accepted by the outside with this image, with this robe. We gotta cast it aside and be as we are. I'm going to show, I'm going to do another parallel here. I'm not going to take much time. And I'd like to show this slide here. So it's, talking about capes, right? So I always like to make this comparison between Nelson Mandela and Saddam Hussein because Nelson Mandela, due to his involvement fighting against apartheid, even though he's a pacifist, he was a pacifist, he got involved into civil unrest, and believe it or not, he somehow got involved into government sabotage. In his fight for what was good, he did things that were not necessarily so good, and as a result, he was 27 years in prison. But the best part is that he spends 27 years in prison, and he emerges as this more mature leader, this better person, right? And he wins. He's not only the first president after apartheid of South Africa. He does not look. He's not trying to punish anybody from the previous regime, and he even wins a Nobel Peace Prize. Can you imagine that? After 27 years of prison, that's really amazing. This other spirit here, Saddam Hussein, is a different story. So Saddam Hussein had his armies, he had his palaces, and of course, with the whole story, he was deposed, and he ran away. So this is the man 30 days after prison, right? So 30 days after prison, he's like a shadow of us. So why is that? What's the difference between these two spirits? The basic difference is that Nelson Mandela, his values, he was not so and be how he was seen to the world. He had his values, he had his ideals, right? So 27. So we're not talking about 27 days, 27 months in prison. We're talking about 27 years in prison. So based on what he had, right, being removed, when you remove all those capes in his experience in prison, he emerges as a better person because that's what he had inside. This other spirit here spent 30 days. So you're talking about total difference of a spirit who spends 27 years and he comes out a better person, and he's on the spirit who spends 30 days in prison, and he's a shadow of who he was, because everything that he was willing, he was so based, all his actions were based on, again, on what he had, on his balances and all his appearances. Okay, so it's very important for us to keep in mind that this is who we are is going to show, especially in tough situations that we experience in life. So moving on here, so the next reference here to action is that he jumped up, right? So he didn't just get up; he actually jumped up. So again, took action, right? He sprung. He did not just take action; he sprung into action, right? He jumped up. He was like ready, and then he goes to Jesus. Again, we see this movement and we see this dynamic behavior. Okay, and we compare these. He's in the beginning of narrative. He was sitting by the road. He was a beggar on the side. He was sitting on the sidelines, right? He was sitting on the sidelines of life, and now he's like progressing. He's back. He wants to go back on the path, but again, it takes this energetic act of him. Verse 51. So this is also, all verses are very important, and this one is fundamental, because Jesus asks him in verse 51, what do you want me to do for you? So the question is, what do you want me to do for you? Now, isn't it obvious? Wasn't it like an obvious question? Maybe not, right? So Jesus asked him what he wanted. And think about it. We have our free will to make our choices. And sometimes we think, oh my God, the choices are, especially when we're observing others, we think, oh my God, the choices are so obvious, right, to that person. But is it really obvious? If I were in someone else's shoes, would I know what to say? I have to confess to everybody here that if I saw Jesus and Jesus asked me, Glaucio, what do you want? I would not know what to say, right? I would not know what to say. I would have to think about it, right? So it is very interesting. Again, that do we always know what we want? And here this question is very important, because are we focused on the right things in life? Are we focused on those things that are going to have an impact on us, that are going to have an impact, a true impact on our lives, right? So do we know, we have an idea, right? We've been studying about the gospel and about all these good teachings. I would not say just throughout our lives, but throughout so many lives, so many reincarnations. So do we know what we want? Do we know the things that will make us productive? Probably know in our heads. But when the time comes for us to make a choice, like in this case here, are we going to make the right choice, right? And then on the second part here of the verse, the blind man says, Teacher, I want to see. And again, two details here we see right now. So first of all, it's important that he refers to Jesus as teacher, right? He refers to Jesus as teacher. He could refer to Jesus as anything, right? But he refers to Jesus as a teacher, because there's a reference to not so much the ability to see. Again, this parable goes beyond the idea of just him being able to see physically, but also have the enlightenment, have the teachings. So to see the light, to see what comes next. So this is very important that he refers to Jesus as teacher. And also, he did not hesitate. I confess, I'm at my level of evolution. I most likely I would have hesitated if a spirit like Jesus asked me what he could do for me. I would come up with all kinds of ideas, some much better than other ideas. But he was right on. Again, he did not hesitate. He said that he wanted to see. So he could have asked for anything. He could have, again, he's a beggar who lives on the streets. He could have asked for riches. He could have asked for a better place, right? to mendicate. He could even have asked for a better cape so people would see him as a beggar, but no, he knew exactly what he wanted, and he asked to see. So again, in the Pathway of Light, chapter 44, there is also a very good explanation as well. We can ask, if you were like me, you'd have trouble. You have a whole list of things to ask Jesus. And in this case here, the blind man, he was in Jericho, so he was expecting something to happen. He was waiting for something to happen. And again, there is this idea of inaction. And how many times are we, and again, we can all relate a lot. At least I can relate a lot to Bartimaeus, because how many times do we sit on our talents? How many times do we sit on our knowledge? How many times do we sit in our opportunities and just waiting for the right moment to act? And again, going back to the whole point of awareness, having the awareness of applying our skills to do what's right. Okay, so see, have the, what we need to do is ask Jesus for the ability, like Bartimaeus asked for the ability to see, is to ask for the ability to see in all situations, events, uh, uh, and people around us, God's hand helping us, the blessings that the universe, that life, the universe, that God are providing us in our circumstances. Sometimes, of course, we don't understand. We have this limited ability to understand our true happiness, and a lot of times, all we gotta do is to be happy. Is the ability to see, is the enlightenment to see what we actually need. And then the final verse, Jesus says to him, "Go, your faith has healed you." At once he was able to see and began to follow Jesus on the way. So again, we see that before Jesus again has a reference to movement. Go is an imperative of movement, meaning you have to keep moving now. And he says that, you were able to see. You gotta, now that you see, now that you have enlightenment, you gotta keep moving. And then Jesus says also that the man's faith had healed him. And it's very important because it could not be religious faith. Religious faith alone, and pretty much just the faith on a particular institution, is not going to help us. And in a gospel according to Spiritism, Kardec explains the two types of faith. Um, pretty much the spirits explain two types of faith. So pretty much the faith, the human faith, and that's the faith in ourselves. So that's the faith of our abilities, limited or not, in different levels, and how we can use those abilities to succeed, to move ahead, to become better people. We all have all different resources, and then having the faith is important, that we have the faith in those resources. Bartimaeus had limited resources, and he had faith in whatever little resources he had. And then there's also divine faith. In divine faith, again, the faith in God, the faith in Jesus, the faith in the laws of the universe that are always right. So Bartimaeus has demonstrated the faith in himself by his actions. I mean, by doing what he could do under the circumstances, and he also had this faith in Jesus. They had this faith in the divine. So going back to my initial explanation of the ethical behavior of doing what's right, and again, just as a recap, so we see here that Bartimaeus, who I myself can relate a lot to, because again, I'm also the son of my imperfections from my imperfections and the defilements from my previous experiences on earth. So, but Bartimaeus, he showed the values, his values. He recognized Jesus as the Messiah. He had the skills, and whatever skills he had. I mean, we're not talking about somebody who has great skills here. It's somebody who can just hear and shout and walk. But he made use of those skills to do what's right, to look for the enlightenment. And he had the awareness because he noticed an opportunity when Jesus was coming to him, and he took that opportunity. So again, and then he was able to see his faith in himself and in the divine helped him see. And again, he did the right thing. And it's very important at the end that he is following Jesus on the way. So if Jesus was leaving Jericho, he was following Jesus. So he was leaving away the material. He's leaving behind that situation of quote unquote poverty and blindness, and now he's moving forward. So that is a very I really like this parable. Again, if you take it as face value, it's simple. It is simple, right? But there's these all these minor details, and that's what I like about this one, because there's all these minor details that we can follow and that can remind us, teach us in extent in a sense, but also remind us of so many things that we have to do.
Thank you so much, Glaucio. First of all, it's always so inspiring for us to hear about, the passages of the life of Jesus. This one in particular is such a beautiful passage, and like you explored during this last hour, it brings us so much food for thought, right? The words, the examples of Jesus all the time. That's why sometimes people say, "Oh, I know this by heart already. Why do I need to hear it again?" But every time we will be able to analyze from a different angle, to explore more certain parts. And I think you did a very good job in bringing so many things for us to think about here.
Oh, nice, awesome.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I'm biased. I love to hear everything about Jesus, but in any case, I mean, I think your presentation uh, instilled us to think even further than what normally we just focus on. So we have some questions
Oh,
here.
nice, awesome.
Let's see. What do you think? Why do you think we have this tendency of accommodating or even procrastinating important actions and decisions?
That's a very good question, and procrastination is an issue for all of us. And we have there is the whole concept of the status quo. We have this tendency of keeping the status quo in our lives, keep things as they are, because change, just like here in Bartinius, change requires energy. In the laws of physics and the Newton's second law. So Newton's second law tells us that there's whenever you have inertia, you also inertia is always going to act against movement, right? So there's this when we have this inertia, and now it requires energy, requires action for us to get out of our status quo and move on. Now, the good news is that the universe has laws, and the same way that the universe has laws, just laws of gravity and electromagnetics, there's also the law of progress. So, as much it is convenient and we stay put due to our because it is convenient, because it requires less energy, quote unquote, from us, the universe has the law of progress. So sooner or later we're going to have to move on. Sooner or later, the law of progress tells us that we cannot stay on the road, we cannot be on the sidelines forever. Events are going to propel us. um, the status quo that is so convenient for us, and again we avoid getting out and getting out of this state of accommodation because we do not want to spend energy. Also, a lot of times we're also afraid, right? We're afraid of what's going to happen next. But the good news is that the law of progress propels us to move forward. So there's no status quo. Sooner or later everything changes in the universe. So the moment that we have right now, a fraction of a second from now, is no longer going to be here. So the universe is always changing, and as things change, things progress. And for as much as we try to stay in the same situation, something's going to happen. It's going to propel us to become better people, to advance as well. there's the whole, again, talking about pain as well. Pain also is a reminder of us. Some people say, oh my God, spiritists, you always talk about pain. That's not true. That's a misconception. We, as spiritists, we should not be expecting pain and celebrating pain. Oh my God, we're here to suffer. That's not true. That's a misconception. Nobody's here to suffer. No, God did not love us. Did not create us love to suffer. However, when we are in this state of inertia, in this state of accommodation, events they come, and those events might be painful, right? Those events might be painful to push us forward. So again, we stay in the state of accommodation, of inhibition, because it requires energy from us, requires effort for us to move forward, and also because of our own fears. But fear not, the universe is going to take care of it, and is going to help us keep going, like it, whether we like it or not.
Some more. How can we know if we are not being blind to what's happening around us?
That is another good question, and I appreciate these questions that make us reflect a lot. So knowing, right, having empathy. So first of all, knowing, right? I mean, so the more I know, and there's all these teachings that have been provided to us, and so knowing about the others, knowing especially about ourselves, it helps us, having this knowledge of what our shortcomings and what might be blinding us, and again having this empathy for others, having putting ourselves in the place of others. That's why charity, without charity there's no salvation. So without this empathy of knowing what's around me, there is no progress, there is no movement, right? I have to feel how others feel, so I can do something about others, in a sense also help myself as well. So talking about the laws of universe, there's the law of society as well, as described in the Spirit's book. And so in this communication with others, in this change of experiences with others, so that increases our awareness of what's happening around us, gives us this awareness of how others feel, and we can learn from them, we can take action, and in a sense also helps us understand a bit about ourselves. So pretty much studying, understanding more, especially of course the teachings of the gospel, and having this empathy to others, and using these experiences also to help us better learn about others and ourselves. So this will be a way for us to become aware, not become so blind of the world. And again, going back to the parable, the blind man, he was sitting there and feeling, and allow me to extrapolate, but feeling sorry for himself. So if I'm just so feeling sorry for myself, if I'm like inside my shell, if I'm blind, right, and I'm like, oh my God, all my suffering. What about the suffering of others? Right? So it is kind of like it is a bit of a therapy, and I try to remember the book by Joanna de Angelis. Actually, I have it here, Dimensions of Truth. So she explains in Dimensions of Truth that this whole process of me understanding the pain of others, not being blind around me, um, and see how others are going through it, is actually beneficial to myself, because again it gives me this impulse to recognize what good I have, all the opportunities I have, and also allows me to not be so blind, and also be good, no longer be the victim, but now take action, and be a contributor to the world, and a contributor to my own improvement as well.
Let's see, we have some more questions here. The mercy of God is present even the times we are blind and can't see the help. Do you feel some adversities happen to help us see the spiritual reality beyond our lives and matter?
Definitely. I'm going to cite a very, it's not, of course, it's not a gospel example, but talking about adversity and, FDR, Frank Delano Roosevelt, he would never be president of the United States. He would never be who helped the world and the nation during a time of tribulations as was World War II if he had never had polio. Because what happened when he had polio is that he was extremely selfish. He was a politician, but he was extremely selfish. And once he had polio, something interesting happened because he became more attached to his wife, Eleanor. And as he became closer and he recognized how his wife was a better companion for him, that's when he actually decided to finally go back, into politics and take a larger role, recognize better, how to do better to others. So, I mean, this is a very mundane example, but again, the pain, that we suffer is a consequence. The pain is a symptom of situations that allow us to not be so blind, right? It's kind of like a shakeup. If the things remain as they are, we remain as we are. So it's not so much the pain. The pain comes as part of the process, right? The same way that if I go to the gym and I'm trying to exercise, then I'm gonna feel pain in my muscles. What means that the pain in my muscles means that my muscles are changing. That means that I'm not, I'm acquiring new abilities. So when we feel pain, when we go through difficult situations, and pain is gonna derive from those difficult situations, then I'm going to learn new lessons, increase my awareness, and become and hopefully, depending on me on how I absorb the lessons, become a better person. Again, going back to the book Heaven and Hell, chapter 5 or 7. I always get the chapters in the book messed up, but I think it's 7 or 5 or 7. Kardec talks about purgatory. And it's kind of neat because when he talks about hell, he's very critical of the concept of hell, of eternal punishment. He talks about heaven, and he's very critical. He says, "Hey, this makes no sense." And then when he talks about purgatory, he's like, this is an idea that, of course, the concept behind purgatory makes sense. And guess what? Earth is our purgatory. Kind of like quote. Not paraphrasing what he wrote. So the whole concept of us being in this state of deprivation, this state of betterment, so that we can reach a better level. So that's what the pain. And again, that's what the pain would do for us. Right? It would bring us better awareness, less blindness. Also, in heaven and hell, they again, he's talking about heaven, and again, it's all about attitude and how how I see the events. Because again, something that to me is very painful due to my blindness, due to my lack of knowledge and understanding, for another spirit, a more evolved spirit, that might be an improvement, that might be an opportunity for growth, right? Hate to bring up our current crisis, but just think how much is being last year has been tough for everybody with our health issue. But think of all the lessons we've learned. Think of all the lessons we learned in medicine. Think about the lessons we learned in technology. Think about the value that we give. If you allow me to share a personal example,
Mm-hmm.
the pain for me to be away from my family overseas, right? It just increases me the awareness, removes my blindness of how important my relatives who are not in this country they represent to me. So it's kind of like these experiences, they really help us reduce the blindness, and not only reduce the blindness, but also take us to the next level to push us forward in our path for betterment.
Okay, let's see. We have some more here. Do you think prejudice can blind us as well?
Big time, right? So just like of course, prejudice, with the prefix pre means before, right? Before any judgment, I can identify somebody. But an interesting point about prejudice is that when we look at others and we classify others in a sense, right? That has to do a lot with our experiences. So those experiences might be from this life, or they might be from previous lives as well. So important thing for us is to have this awareness and realize, am I being prejudicious? And again, prejudice can happen in a way, right? I'm being prejudicious. I may have a preconception of somebody about that person's appearance, that person's race, but I can also have a preconception about that person's ideology. So we got to be careful with this blindness, as our friend mentioned to us here, of prejudice, because it can come in so different ways, and blind us in so different ways. So we have to look at us and see how is it blinding us, is us keeping us from see in other people the value. I have an interesting there's a very interesting example, Chico Xavier, because he used to read a lot, right? There's a story that he used to read a lot, and he used to read anything, and people would ask him, why do you waste so much time reading so much? And he used an expression as a very I believe is a very expression from Minas Gerais, from where he came from. But he says, hey, I wanna reach the eye of the coconut, which does not translate at all in English. Sorry, it was a literal translation. But what he was trying to say is, I'm trying to reach that point in which I can communicate with other people. So, yes, prejudice can blind us in different shapes or form. Trying to know more about, know more about, again, the gospel, know more about other cultures, know more about other people might help us as well. It's interesting, the whole current dialogue, unfortunately, in the US and in the world in general, this whole concept of divisiveness, of us and them, I'm sorry, us and them. And the interesting thing is that I myself, I'm, in my point of view, ideologies, I'm very moderate, I'm very in the center. And I have friends who are as far right as you can imagine, and I have friends who are as far left as you can imagine. And it's funny when you talk to people, and doesn't matter how people see, what kind of ideology people have, people are all looking for the same thing, right? People are all looking for the same thing. They're looking for a better lives for themselves. They're looking for justice. Of course, there are different ideals of justice, but people are looking for the same thing. So looking for, not allowing this blindness, the prejudice, first of all, recognizing that it is in us, trying to know more about others, about other points of view, and again, the gospel itself. And so those will be like measures that will help us not keep prejudice blinding us, and see in other people the value that other people can have. Again, going back to the whole garments and concept of garments and robes, going beyond that and actually seeing people straight how they are without any labels.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Glaucio. Thank you, everyone that have been following us. There are so many greetings here of New Year, for a Happy New Year, and congratulating you for the talk as well. And please do remember that next week we continue. So we will have two very special guests next week. We will have Eduardo and Leo Haddad Father and Son will be talking to us
Wow.
about a happy new thinking. So, getting in tune with all of this, New Year's, they are going to be talking about happy new thinking, and it's going to be wonderful to see Father and Son talking to us. So don't miss next week. Glaucio, once again, thank you so much for being here with us.
My
You are,
pleasure.
a very active part, of course, of the United States Spiritist Federation. And we would like to invite you to do the final prayer for us, please.
Oh, with pleasure. At this moment, let our minds deviate from any concerns we might have externally, any of our afflictions, any of our stresses, and let's connect with the spiritual world, with our spiritual friends, with Jesus. Let us be thankful for everything that life offers us, all the opportunities that we have. A lot of times we don't recognize how blessed we are. Sometimes we recognize how blessed we are for our friends, for our family, sometimes for our simple things, just like the ability to see, to talk, to walk. So we got to be recognize the importance of all these things in our lives. Also, it's so important for us to seek our enlightenment, seek for ways to nation. Things are not always easy. We're always encountering pain. We're always encountering challenges. But those we should see those as blessings, as opportunities for to push us forward and to keep us moving. And whenever possible, move with Jesus. Keep walking with Jesus. And in our limited abilities, help also in his work here on the planet. Wishing all of us a very blessed 2021. May this year be for us a year of opportunities, a very active year, and let's make the very best of everything that it has to offer for us and for our loved ones. So be it.